When we talk about avoidant attachment, it's important to first understand that this isn't just a relationship quirk or some kind of stubbornness. It's a deep-rooted pattern shaped early in life, often from childhood experiences where emotional needs felt unsafe, unfulfilled, or confusing. Avoidant individuals develop a protective mechanism, a way to keep themselves from feeling vulnerable, exposed, or dependent on others. This protective strategy shows up as emotional distance, a strong desire for independence, and sometimes even a seeming reluctance to occur. But here's the key. This isn't about rejecting you. It's about managing their own internal discomfort. When an avoidant person pulls back, it's often because closeness feels overwhelming, even threatening, not because they don't value the relationship. They have learned that relying on others might lead to pain or loss, so they create space between themselves and the people they care about as a form of emotional self-defense. This space helps them feel safe, but it can feel confusing and painful to their partners who crave connection and reassurance. It's also crucial to understand that avoidants aren't emotionless. They just tend to experience emotions differently or suppress them to avoid feeling overwhelmed. What looks like coldness or detachment might actually be their way of coping with feelings they find hard to express or manage. Recognizing this helps shift the way we interpret their behavior. Instead of seeing avoidance as rejection, we start to see it as fear-based self-protection. This understanding doesn't excuse hurtful behavior, but it allows us to approach the situation with more empathy and clarity. When you know the root of avoidance, you begin to realize that the distance isn't personal. It's a pattern that comes from inside them, a place that's often full of conflicting desires for connection and autonomy. This is why avoidance can sometimes seem hot and cold. They want closeness, but also feel the need to run from it. It's not a game or manipulation. It's an internal tug of war. For hours. When you truly grasp what's going on beneath the surface, you're empowered to respond differently. Instead of chasing or trying to fix them, you can create space for healthy boundaries and encourage emotional safety. You can communicate in ways that don't trigger their fears but invite gradual connection. The avoidance struggle is real, and so is yours. But understanding the avoidant attachment style is the first step to breaking free from confusion, frustration, and feeling unvalued. It allows you to see beyond their behavior to the fears they're managing and helps you keep your own sense of worth intact while navigating a relationship that might sometimes feel like a maze. Ultimately, this understanding doesn't just help you make sense of their actions. It helps you protect your heart, set clear boundaries, and decide what is truly healthy for you. Because knowing the why behind avoidance gives you power, not to change them, but to choose how you show up, how you love, and how you protect your own emotional well-being. When someone has an avoidant attachment style, what you're really seeing is a deep fear of intimacy and vulnerability. This fear isn't about you personally. It's about what closeness represents to them. Intimacy means opening up, showing the parts of themselves that feel fragile, uncertain, or imperfect. And for an avoidant person, that can feel terrifying. You have to remember that vulnerability requires trust and safety, and avoidants often grew up in environments where trust was inconsistent or emotional expression was discouraged. Because of this, being emotionally open feels risky. It could mean being hurt, rejected, or overwhelmed. So instead of leaning in, they lean away. It's a protective mechanism designed to keep them safe from perceived emotional danger. This fear causes avoidants to keep their distance emotionally. They might shut down conversations about feelings, avoid commitment, or pull away right when things start to get close. It can be confusing and painful for their partner because it feels like a rejection of the relationship itself. But in reality, it's the fear of being truly known and the discomfort of emotional dependence that's driving them. What's important to understand here is that intimacy for avoidance isn't just about physical closeness or spending time together. It's about emotional closeness. It's the scary act of letting someone see their vulnerabilities, doubts, and fears. Because they often associate intimacy with losing control or being overwhelmed, they create emotional distance to feel safe. This fear of vulnerability also means they tend to hide or suppress their emotions. Instead of expressing hurt, fear, or even love openly, they might seem detached or indifferent. But beneath that calm exterior is a person struggling with their own internal conflicts, wanting connection, but terrified of it at the same time. For you, the partner, this means the challenge isn't to break down walls quickly or force them to open up. That usually backfires and makes them retreat more. Instead, it's about creating consistent, gentle safety and showing through your actions. Not just your words, that being vulnerable is okay, that they won't be abandoned or overwhelmed if they take a chance with you. You have to respect their pace because vulnerability can't be rushed or demanded. It requires patience and empathy. When avoidants finally start to lower their defenses, it's because they've slowly learned to trust that intimacy doesn't have to be dangerous. Understanding this fear also helps you separate their emotional distance from your worth. Their pullback isn't a reflection of your lovability, it's a reflection of their internal struggle with vulnerability. So, when you realize that their avoidance comes from fear, not from lack of care, you start to see the relationship differently. You stop personalizing their need for space and start to appreciate the bravery it takes for them to even stay close at all. Ultimately, the fear of intimacy and vulnerability is the core challenge avoidants face, and recognizing this is a powerful step for both you and them. It allows you to approach the relationship with compassion, hold your boundaries firmly, and encourage growth without losing yourself in the process. Because real connection happens not when fear disappears overnight, but when both people learn to lean into vulnerability together at a pace that feels safe. One of the most painful feelings when dealing with someone who is avoidant is the fear that you could be replaced, that you're just one option among many, easily swapped out when things get hard or when they feel overwhelmed. But here's the truth you need to hear loud and clear. You are not replaceable. You are completely unique, and no one else can be you in that relationship. When an avoidant person pulls away, it can feel like they're looking for something else or that someone else could do what you do better. But the reality is that avoidants aren't trying to find a replacement. They're trying to manage their own internal conflict. Their fear of intimacy and emotional closeness makes them appear as if they're searching for someone else. But in truth, what they're really trying to do is avoid the discomfort they feel inside. You bring to the relationship things no one else can. Your energy, your way of loving, your patience, your unique quirks, and the way you connect. All of these are yours alone. When you love with authenticity, you create a bond that isn't about filling a void or checking a box. It's about connection on a deeply personal level. The problem comes when you start believing the lie that you could be replaced, or worse, that you should be replaced. This belief chips away at your self-esteem and leaves you chasing approval or validation, which is exhausting and unfair to you. Understanding your irreplaceability means owning your value, regardless of how the avoidant behaves. Their distancing isn't a reflection of your worth or the love you give. It's a reflection of their own fears and limitations. No one else can love in exactly the way you do because no one else is you. Your love has a fingerprint, and that makes it priceless. When you realize this, it changes everything. Instead of scrambling to prove your worth or contorting yourself to meet their needs, you start to respect yourself and your boundaries. You don't settle for less than being fully seen and appreciated because you know your worth isn't negotiable. This mindset also shifts your approach to the relationship. You stop trying to fix or chase and start focusing on creating a healthy dynamic where your love is met with respect, not just tolerated. You become clear that if they can't meet you halfway, it's not because you failed. It's because they weren't ready or able to handle the kind of love you offer. When avoidants finally understand that you were never replaceable, it's a powerful moment of clarity for them. It's when they realize that no one else could have done what you did. No one else had the patience, the understanding, or the commitment to stick around through their fears. So hold on to this truth tightly. You are unique, your love is unique, and your presence in someone's life cannot be swapped out for a cheaper or easier version. That's your power, and it's what makes you unforgettable. When you stop believing you're replaceable, you stop settling for being treated like an option, and that's where real respect and love begin. One of the most common misunderstandings when dealing with an avoidant partner is interpreting their difficulty with commitment as a sign that they don't care about you, or that they are somehow not the right one. But the truth is far more complex and freeing. Avoidants don't struggle with commitment because of you, they struggle with commitment because of themselves. Avoidant attachment stems from a deep-rooted fear of losing autonomy and being emotionally overwhelmed. Commitment, for an avoidant, often feels like a loss of control. It's not about whether they want to be with you or whether they see value in the relationship. It's about the anxiety that comes with depending on someone else and letting someone depend on them. This creates an internal conflict where their desire for connection clashes with their need for independence. This struggle doesn't mean their feelings for you are any less real or significant. In fact, many avoidants genuinely care about their partners and want to be close. But their brains and emotional systems have learned to prioritize safety and self-protection over closeness. So when the conversation turns to commitment, whether it's moving in together, defining the relationship, or planning a future, they instinctively retreat. It's important to realize that avoidants often have an intense inner dialogue around commitment that goes beyond the surface. They might ask themselves questions like, will I lose myself if I fully commit? Will I become too vulnerable? Can I handle the expectations that come with a serious relationship? These fears aren't a reflection of their feelings for you, but rather a reflection of how their attachment system processes intimacy. Because of this, it's not uncommon for avoidants to keep people at arm's length, even if they care deeply. Their struggle is with the concept of dependency itself, which can feel suffocating or threatening. So when they pull back or hesitate to commit, it's a defense mechanism designed to protect their emotional well-being, not a judgment on your worth or the relationship's value. Understanding this distinction can save you from personalizing their hesitations or feeling rejected. It allows you to see the commitment struggle as an internal battle they're facing, one that requires patience, empathy, and clear boundaries. You can support an avoidant by creating a safe space where commitment isn't rushed or pressured. They need to know they can gradually let go of their fears without losing themselves. And they need to experience that true connection doesn't mean losing independence. It means finding a balance between closeness and autonomy. At the same time, it's crucial for you to recognize your own needs. You deserve a relationship where your desire for commitment is respected and met. If the avoidance fears keep them from fully engaging despite your patience, it's okay to reconsider what you're willing to accept. In summary, avoidants struggle with commitment not because of you, but because of their own emotional wiring. This understanding helps you approach the relationship with compassion while protecting your own emotional health. It gives you clarity on when to be patient and when to move on, knowing that their struggle isn't a reflection of your value, but a sign of their inner journey. Boundaries are one of the most powerful tools you have when dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. But boundaries aren't just about keeping people out or shutting down communication. They're about defining what you will and won't accept in a relationship. They're about protecting your emotional well-being and communicating your self-worth clearly. When you're in a relationship with an avoidant, it's easy to fall into patterns where you constantly give more than you receive, tolerate mixed signals, or lower your standards just to keep the connection alive. This often happens because avoidants can struggle with emotional availability, which can leave you feeling unseen, unappreciated, or uncertain. Setting boundaries is the way to say, I respect myself enough not to settle for less than I deserve. Boundaries send a message both to yourself and to your partner that your feelings, time, and energy are valuable. When you clearly communicate what behaviors are acceptable and what aren't, you create a framework that helps avoidants understand how to show up differently. It's a way to teach them that your love isn't unconditional in the sense that it comes with no expectations. Your love comes with respect, consistency, and mutual care. For avoidants, boundaries can actually feel like a relief because they don't have to guess what's okay and what's not. They know where the lines are, which can reduce anxiety about commitment and closeness. When boundaries are firm and consistent, it creates a safer space for them to explore emotional intimacy without feeling overwhelmed or trapped. But setting boundaries doesn't mean you're being rigid or punitive. It means you're being clear, kind, and assertive about your needs. For example, if an avoidant partner repeatedly cancels plans last minute or avoids emotional conversations, setting a boundary might look like saying, I need reliability and honesty. If you can't commit to plans, it's okay to say so, but I need to know where we stand. This isn't about controlling them. It's about protecting yourself from confusion and disappointment. Boundaries also help you avoid falling into the trap of chasing or people pleasing. When you have clear limits, you're less likely to tolerate behaviors that hurt you and more likely to attract someone who respects and values you. It's a form of self-care disguised as strength. Importantly, boundaries help you stay connected to your own identity and values. When you lose yourself trying to make an avoidant partner comfortable, you end up feeling depleted and unfulfilled. Boundaries keep you grounded in your own worth and remind you that a healthy relationship is a two-way street. In essence, boundaries are the foundation for any relationship to thrive, but they are especially crucial when navigating avoidant attachment dynamics. They create clarity, respect, and emotional safety. They empower you to love yourself as much as you love the other person. When you set and maintain healthy boundaries, you not only protect yourself, you give your avoidant partner the opportunity to meet you in a space of honesty and growth. And that is the beginning of real connection. Emotional availability is one of those phrases you hear a lot in relationship conversations. But what does it really mean? At its core, emotional availability is about being open and present with your feelings and being willing to connect with someone else's emotions without shutting down or pulling away. When it comes to avoidant attachment, emotional availability is often the biggest challenge. Not just for them, but for the relationship as a whole. An avoidant partner often struggles with showing up emotionally because it can feel uncomfortable or threatening. They might keep their feelings hidden, avoid deep conversations, or disconnect when things get too intense. This behavior creates a kind of emotional gap between partners that can feel confusing and painful, especially for someone who craves connection and reassurance. But emotional availability isn't just about sharing feelings constantly or being overly expressive. It's about creating a space where both people feel safe to be themselves, flaws, fears, hopes, and all, and knowing that their emotions will be met with understanding, not judgment or withdrawal. It's about responsiveness, empathy, and a willingness to lean into discomfort rather than escape it. For someone with an avoidant style, emotional availability might feel like a slow and difficult process. It requires learning to tolerate vulnerability, trust that being open won't lead to rejection, and understand that closeness can be a source of strength rather than weakness. This is not an overnight shift, and it often requires patience from both partners. From your perspective, fostering emotional availability means encouraging openness without pushing or demanding it. It means listening actively, validating their feelings even when they're hard to express, and creating a consistent environment where emotional expression is safe and welcomed. It's about small, steady moments of connection rather than grand declarations. At the same time, it's vital to keep your own emotional needs in focus. Emotional availability goes both ways. You deserve someone who can show up for you, meet you where you are, and respond to your feelings with care. If you find that you're always the one reaching out or making space for emotions while your partner remains distant, it's worth considering how this imbalance affects your well-being. The importance of emotional availability in an avoidant dynamic cannot be overstated because it's the bridge to deeper connection. When avoidants begin to open emotionally, even just a little, they signal trust and willingness to engage in the relationship on a more authentic level. This breakthrough often leads to greater intimacy, mutual respect, and a healthier, more balanced partnership. Ultimately, emotional availability is a skill that can be developed. It takes awareness, effort, and sometimes support from therapy or personal growth work. But when both partners commit to cultivating emotional availability, the relationship can move from uncertainty and distance to genuine connection and shared vulnerability. Remember, emotional availability is not just about feeling good all the time. It's about being present even when it's hard, uncomfortable, or scary. It's about choosing connection over avoidance and embracing the messy, beautiful reality of being human together. Healing avoidant patterns in a relationship is not a quick fix or a simple process. It takes patience, real, deep patience, not just with the other person, but with yourself and the journey you're both on. Avoidant behaviors are often the result of years of conditioning, fear, and emotional self-protection, so expecting immediate change is unrealistic and can lead to frustration and disappointment. Patience means understanding that the avoidant partner's fear of closeness won't vanish overnight. It's a slow process of building trust, feeling safe enough to lower defenses, and learning new ways to relate emotionally. When you allow this process to unfold at its natural pace, you create a space where healing can truly happen, rather than forcing change that might push them further away. So, this doesn't mean being passive or tolerating behaviors that hurt you. Patience is an active choice to stay grounded in your own values and boundaries while giving the relationship time to evolve. It's about balancing empathy with self-respect, holding your needs firmly without trying to rush or control the other person's growth. For the avoidant partner, patience from you can feel like a lifeline. It shows them that you're willing to stay through the discomfort and uncertainty without demanding they become someone they're not right now. This kind of steady presence can gently encourage them to take small steps toward vulnerability and connection, knowing they won't be judged or abandoned for their fears. From your perspective, practicing patience also means managing your own expectations. It means recognizing that setbacks, moments of withdrawal, or mixed signals are part of the pattern and don't necessarily mean failure. Instead of reacting with frustration or pulling away yourself, patience invites you to stay curious and compassionate, looking beneath the surface to understand what might be triggering the avoidant behavior. Patience also helps you avoid the trap of codependency, where you try to fix, change, or rescue your partner. Healing avoidant patterns isn't about rescuing anyone. It's about creating an environment where both people can grow authentically. That requires time and space, not pressure. It's important to remember that patience is a two-way street. Both partners need to be committed to the process for it to work. The avoidant person must also be willing to reflect on their fears and push their boundaries, even if just a little at a time. Your patience supports this, but it doesn't do the work for them. In the end, patience is one of the most powerful gifts you can offer in a relationship with an avoidant partner. It's the foundation for trust, growth, and deeper connection. Without it, misunderstandings and hurt can build up. With it, even the most challenging patterns can begin to shift. So, when you find yourself feeling frustrated or impatient, remind yourself that real change is a journey. Celebrate the small wins and understand that each step forward, no matter how slow, is progress. Patience isn't passive waiting. It's an active, loving choice to support healing while honoring your own worth. When someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away from you, not because you hurt them, but seemingly because you got too close, it's often not about you at all. It's about what you represented. You became a mirror. And for many avoidant individuals, being mirrored too clearly, too intimately, can feel overwhelming. Because in that mirror, they don't just see love. They see their fears, their wounds, and all the parts of themselves they haven't fully faced. You, by showing up with love, consistency, and emotional availability, inadvertently held up a reflection of everything they've spent years trying to manage or hide. Your willingness to connect deeply, to be emotionally vulnerable, to talk about your needs and feelings, it all shines light on the areas where they feel the most insecure or unprepared. That kind of reflection is not easy to face, especially for someone who's used to emotional independence as a form of safety. Avoidants often struggle with intimacy not because they don't want it, but because they fear being truly seen. Intimacy requires emotional exposure. It demands that you let someone in, not just into the good, curated parts, but into the messy, uncertain places too. When you came into their life, present and grounded, you offered a kind of closeness they weren't ready for. And instead of leaning in, many avoidants retreat. Not because you're wrong, but because you're right. You made them feel something real, and that reality was too confronting. In your presence, they might have felt seen in ways they weren't prepared to be. You reflected back to them their inability to express emotions, their fear of being dependent on someone else, their discomfort with intimacy. That kind of truth can be painful, especially when someone has spent most of their life building walls to avoid it. What you need to know is this: being a mirror for someone is not a weakness. It's a testament to the depth and authenticity you brought to the connection. You were real, and realness always reveals. You didn't scare them away by being a too much. You just brought clarity they weren't ready to handle. This is not something to feel guilty about. In fact, it's something to be proud of, because people who show up authentically, who are willing to see and be seen, are the ones who spark real transformation, even if it doesn't happen right away. Sometimes your presence is the catalyst for someone else's healing, even if they have to do that work without you. Being the mirror doesn't mean you failed. It means you were honest, open, and emotionally courageous. And while that may have been too much for someone who was still hiding from themselves, it doesn't make your presence any less valuable. If anything, it proves that you had a depth that couldn't be ignored, even if it couldn't be embraced at the time. One of the hardest truths to accept when you've loved someone with an avoidant attachment style is that the healing you hope to witness might not happen in your presence. You may have poured your heart into the connection, shown patience, understanding, and grace, hoping that your love would be enough to break down their walls, and sometimes it looked like it might be working. There were moments they softened, moments they let you in. But then, just as quickly, they would retreat, and eventually they left or you had to. The natural question that follows is, did they ever care? Did they change? And if they do heal later, why not with you? Avoidant individuals don't often begin their real emotional work while they're still in the thick of intimacy. Because intimacy itself is their greatest trigger. Being close to someone, truly close, puts pressure on the very patterns they've used to stay emotionally safe. As a result, they often only begin to reflect seriously on their behavior after the relationship ends. The silence gives them space. The absence of your emotional presence removes the internal pressure to show up perfectly. It's in that distance that they begin to see what they had and what they lost. But here's the most important thing to understand. Your impact doesn't disappear just because you're no longer there. Sometimes you are the lesson that stays with someone long after you're gone. Your love might not have been the chapter they were ready to fully open, but it was the chapter that made them realize the book existed. Your presence, your emotional depth, your boundaries, they may not have been able to embrace it in real time, but they can't unexperience it. Healing for avoidance is rarely a visible transformation. It often looks like a slow unraveling of defenses, private realizations in the middle of a quiet night, or deep discomfort that eventually leads to growth. And while it's natural to wish that growth had happened with you, the truth is, not all healing is meant to be witnessed. Sometimes your role in someone's life was to crack the surface. That is no small thing. You weren't replaceable. You were pivotal. You were pivotal. You were the beginning of a different kind of truth, one that asked them to look at themselves differently. And while they may walk away or seem to move on, that doesn't mean they're unchanged. They may start showing up differently in another relationship, not because that person is a better, but because you woke them up. The difficult, beautiful paradox is this: love doesn't always get to see the change it helped create. But that doesn't make your part any less real. Your presence was the beginning of something, and even if the healing doesn't happen in front of you, it may very well happen because of you. When someone with an avoidant attachment style begins to struggle in a relationship, it's tempting to think it's because of something you did. That maybe you were too intense, too emotional, too demanding, or simply too much. But more often than not, what you actually were was a catalyst. You didn't cause their emotional shutdown. You triggered it. And there is a world of difference between the two. Avoidants often carry unresolved fears from early relational experiences, fears of engulfment, vulnerability, or abandonment. These patterns were built long before you arrived. What your presence did was activate those dormant fears by introducing the possibility of real closeness. And while that may sound like a good thing, it doesn't always feel that way to someone who spent their life equating closeness with danger. So when they began to pull away, shut down, or even blame you, it wasn't a reflection of your shortcomings. It was a reflection of the internal storm they didn't know how to handle. You exposed the gap between what they said they wanted, love, intimacy, partnership, and what they were truly emotionally prepared to receive. That doesn't make you wrong. It just means you revealed the truth of where they actually were in their emotional development. It's important to stop internalizing the idea that you broke something. You didn't break them. You didn't cause their fear. You didn't make them avoid commitment or vulnerability. What you did was show up with openness, with truth, with depth, and that was confronting. You were the mirror that made them realize their armor wasn't sustainable. And sometimes when people realize they're not ready, they retreat and blame the trigger instead of examining the wound. That's where your growth comes in, recognizing that your role was meaningful, even if it wasn't permanent, that your love stirred something inside them they may not have been ready to meet. But that doesn't diminish your worth. It highlights your power. You were the wake-up call. The gentle, or maybe not so gentle, nudge from the universe that said, this isn't working anymore. Something needs to change. Whether or not they accepted the call is up to them, but you were never the reason they couldn't love. You were simply the first person who asked them to love in a way they hadn't yet learned. Being a catalyst can be painful, especially when it ends in distance or silence. But it's also profound, because catalysts are unforgettable. You left a mark. Not because you broke them, but because you brought truth into the room, and truth always lingers, even after the person who delivered it is gone. So stop asking what you could have done differently. Start honoring what you did right. You were real. You were available. You were brave enough to love someone who was still afraid of being loved. That is not weakness. That is strength most people never even touch.